Hello, this is Biz Big Picture, connecting the dots to deliver you the big picture. On October 23, 2024, during Qualcomm's Snapdragon Summit 2024, ARM issued a notice terminating Qualcomm's license to use its architecture. ARM set a 2-month grace period, but nearly a month has already passed without any significant progress. In the previous video titled, "What Made ARM Upset with Qualcomm?" we focused on ARM's perspective. In this video, we'll shift our focus to Qualcomm's story. Qualcomm is a much larger company than ARM. In this dispute, it seems to be adopting a strategy that dismisses ARM's warnings. To fully understand Qualcomm's situation, we first need to take a look at the history of mobile communication technology. "5G might be a familiar term, but you may not be familiar with its details. 5G stands for the fifth generation, meaning that communication speeds and functionalities have evolved to the fifth generation. Although it varies by region, 5G networks are already quite widespread, especially in developed countries. 1G refers to the period when mobile phones were first commercialized, and it was initially launched in Japan in 1979, during the golden era of its economy. 1G networks relied on analog transmission for voice calls, resulting in noisy and often unclear conversations. At that time, FDMA was used to transmit voice signals over radio waves. While this method was simple to implement, it required assigning a unique frequency band to each user, which made it difficult to accommodate a large number of users. In the 2G era, digital communication was introduced. The GSM and CDMA standards competed to become the dominant digital mobile technology, each employing different methods to transmit digital signals over the air. Initially, the GSM camp took the lead. GSM was first commercialized in Finland in 1991 and quickly gained widespread adoption in Europe. GSM utilized TDMA, a technique where time is segmented into small slots. These time slots are then assigned to different users, allowing them to share the same frequency channel. The T in TDMA signifies that time is divided, enabling multiple users to access the same frequency. However, users had to wait for their assigned time slots, which could lead to delays in call connection. To address this, CDMA technology was developed, which allows all users to receive all signals simultaneously. Each user is assigned a unique code that enables them to extract only their intended data from the received signal. CDMA was technically more challenging to implement than TDMA. However, Qualcomm succeeded in commercializing CDMA technology. After the 3G era, international standards were unified, starting with 4G. Today, 5G networks are being widely deployed, primarily in developed countries. With the transition from 1G to 5G, communication speeds have increased. While 1G was limited to voice calls, 2G introduced text message functions. 3G enabled internet connectivity and video streaming, and 4G brought about the era of smartphones. But it's a little bit ambiguous to define the characteristics of 5G. 5G can be categorized into two primary bands: sub-6 GHz, which operates below 6 GHz, and millimeter wave, which operates at frequencies above 24 GHz. While sub-6 GHz offers fast speeds, the level of speed required for autonomous driving is typically associated with millimeter wave technology. Millimeter wave has a short range, does not bend easily, and cannot penetrate walls. Simply put, if you can't see any millimeter wave stations or devices around you, it's safe to assume that millimeter wave service isn't available for you. Given the current level of technology and economic feasibility, it seems challenging to deploy a nationwide, dense millimeter wave network. Fortunately, customers have reached a level where they no longer experience significant discomfort with sub-6 GHz services. This has made it significantly easier for telecom companies to make choices. It is goodbye to millimeter wave for most area outside major downtowns in the US. Telecom equipment and modem makers had high hopes for millimeter wave, expecting it to be a gold mine. Unfortunately, things didn't unfold as expected. Of course, if the self-driving car market grows, it will lead to a demand for millimeter wave equipment. However, until then, where should modem manufacturers look for growth drivers? And that is exactly what Qualcomm is concerned about. Dr. Irwin Jacobs, who co-founded Qualcomm, was a professor at UC San Diego. In 1968, he founded Linkabit to develop satellite encryption equipment. When Linkabit was acquired by another company in 1985, Dr. Irwin Jacobs left Linkabit and founded Qualcomm. In 1988, Qualcomm launched OmniTrax, a truck tracking system, and achieved significant success. With the funds secured at that time, it invested in the development of CDMA for 2G digital communications. In Europe, GSM was becoming the standard, and in the US market, both AT&T and T-Mobile had adopted the GSM method, making it difficult for Qualcomm to gain momentum for CDMA. That's when Korea emerged as Qualcomm's White Knight. One of Korean government-funded research institute collaborated with Qualcomm to develop CDMA technology. Thanks to this, Qualcomm successfully commercialized CDMA, starting with Verizon in 1995, followed by Sprint and the Korean market. Qualcomm owes its success to Korea. 4G technology around 2010 brought together GSM and CDMA technologies, resulting in a unified global standard. In this way, elements based on CDMA technology were more widely incorporated, which enabled Qualcomm to emerge as a leading company in mobile communication technology. AP chips are an essential component of smartphones. An AP chip refers to a tiny chip that combines components such as the CPU, GPU, and communication modem into a single chip. Qualcomm supplies high-performance AP chips, while MediaTek provides mid to low-range chips. Samsung and Huawei often use internally designed chips depending on circumstances. Apple, on the other hand, develops its own AP chips, but continues to rely on Qualcomm for modem solutions. With the blossoming of the smartphone market in the 2010s, Qualcomm experienced significant revenue growth by supplying AP chips to the market. However, in 2015, Qualcomm's pursuit of high performance led to overheating issues, causing a decline in sales. Furthermore, in 2015 and 2016, Qualcomm faced significant antitrust penalties from Chinese and Korean regulatory authorities, respectively, for abusing its dominant market position. Qualcomm adopted a strategy of licensing its entire patent portfolio as a package, rather than licensing individual patents, making it challenging for competitors to access its technology. Moreover, by applying the same patent licensing rates to smartphone manufacturers as it did to chipset manufacturers, Qualcomm imposed excessive pricing on smartphone manufacturers. The fallout from this incident spread to Apple. In 2016, the Korean antitrust regulators summoned one of Apple executives to testify regarding Qualcomm's business practices, and the testimony was used as evidence supporting the claim that Qualcomm had abused its dominant market position. In response, Qualcomm became infuriated with Apple, leading to a lawsuit between the two companies in 2017. Apple sued Qualcomm, alleging that the company had abused its dominant market position by charging excessive licensing fees. Qualcomm countersued, claiming that Apple had breached their contract by withholding royalty payments. In January 2019, the U.S. District Court in California tentatively ruled that Qualcomm had abused its dominant market position by imposing unfair licensing terms on companies purchasing its modem chipsets. Apple's victory was just around the corner. However, in April 2019, Samsung released the world's first 5G smartphone. Apple had planned to source its 5G modem chips from Intel. However, Intel ultimately failed in the development of the 5G modem. Apple's remaining alternatives for 5G modem suppliers were limited to Samsung, Huawei, and Qualcomm. Samsung reportedly declined Apple's request for 5G modems, and Huawei was not considered due to the US-China trade conflict. As a result, Qualcomm was the only option left for Apple. In April 2019, not to fall behind in the 5G race, Apple reconciled with Qualcomm and agreed to source 5G modem chips from Qualcomm. The contract is set to expire in 2025, with Apple's extension option until April 2027. It was a dramatic comeback for Qualcomm in the ninth inning. The home run was practically hit by Samsung. However, Qualcomm couldn't fully celebrate its victory. Apple has been working on developing its own 5G modems since acquiring Intel's modem business in 2019, increasing the likelihood of internalizing 5G modem after 2026. What can Qualcomm do next? Anticipating a post-Apple era, Qualcomm develops a growth strategy focused on automotive and PC solutions. Qualcomm has named its automotive operating system solution Digital Chassis and likens it to a smartphone on wheels. It prevents collisions between vehicles, enhances driving convenience, and supports autonomous driving. Qualcomm's automotive solutions are known to account for less than 10% of its revenue. However, with strengthened collaborations with companies such as BMW, Renault, GM, and Stellantis, it is a business expected to see growth in the future. The advent of autonomous driving could lead to an explosive increase in demand for Qualcomm modems, offering significant synergies with its existing businesses. Qualcomm has also ventured into the PC market. The market Qualcomm is targeting is the lightweight laptop segment, where portability and energy efficiency are key. Windows operating systems for PCs have primarily been based on the x86 architecture. However, as market demand for portability and power efficiency grew, Microsoft began releasing Windows on ARM architecture in late 2017. ARM-based Windows PCs are thinner and lighter, but compatibility issues with existing x86 programs make it difficult to predict their market success. The competition in the PC CPU market is intense. Qualcomm's Snapdragon not only has to compete with x86-based chips of Intel and AMD, but also with NVIDIA's ARM-based chips, starting possibly in 2025. Given the intense competition, they'll need to get it right, won't they? To design the CPU for its AP chips, Qualcomm initially modified ARM's architecture. However, they were unsatisfied with the performance. As a result, they significantly revised the ARM architecture and created the Orion architecture. To develop the Orion architecture, Qualcomm acquired Nuvia in 2021. Nuvia was founded in 2019 by engineers who had previously designed Apple's AP chips. Chips based on the Orion architecture were unveiled at Qualcomm's Snapdragon Summit 2024. On the same day, ARM notified Qualcomm that their license agreement will be terminated in 60 days. According to the contract between ARM and Nuvia, Qualcomm needs ARM's approval to use Nuvia's developments, but it is reported that Qualcomm did not obtain such approval. The market is concerned that, depending on the court's ruling, the most of Qualcomm's products using ARM architecture could face a sales ban. However, Qualcomm's response has been surprisingly calm. Apple and Samsung are Qualcomm's largest customers, each accounting for approximately 20% of Qualcomm's total revenue, respectively. Apple has been developing its own modem, and its current cooperation with Qualcomm could end in 2026. Samsung has its own capabilities for designing AP chips, making Qualcomm's revenue less stable. It is fortunate that, due to U.S. semiconductor export restrictions, Chinese smartphone manufacturers, who are now facing difficulties in sourcing advanced chips, are likely to rely on Qualcomm's AP chips for their high-end models. However, Qualcomm cannot export 5G chips to companies like Huawei that are subject to U.S. government export controls. With limited market demand for millimeter wave, revenue growth in the modem business is expected to stagnate. Of course, if autonomous driving becomes widespread, the demand for 5G modems could surge. But the question remains, when will that day come? Until that day comes, Qualcomm is preparing for the autonomous driving era through its digital chassis business, but it doesn't seem likely to significantly impact their earnings in the near term. The gap, expected to be left by Apple in 2026, will need to be filled by AI PC chips. However, the competition is fierce. In the middle of this, ARM has filed a lawsuit. Essentially, they are asking for more money. Qualcomm CDMA patent licensing fees have frequently led to disputes with other companies. This has resulted in the term Qualcomm CDMA tax being coined. This time, it seems like it's Qualcomm's turn to pay the tax, what's known as the ARM tax. From the perspective of company size, the showdown between ARM and Qualcomm is a David and Goliath battle. Aside from the lawsuit with ARM, what is Qualcomm's top priority? Is it their deal with Apple or the digital chassis project? There are concerns that losing the ARM license could halt a significant portion of Qualcomm's sales, but surprisingly, Qualcomm seems rather calm about the situation. Who is making the misjudgment, the market or Qualcomm? Time is running out. The grace period granted by ARM to Qualcomm expires on December 22, 2024. Biz Big Picture.